Hello, hello, and welcome to Inner Work for Greater Good. My name is Emily Eldridge. I am the founder of ChangeLight and the creator of the ChangeLight system. And if you've been following my episodes, you'll see that I've been sharing a lot about the ChangeLight system, or at least the very least the discoveries that I've made in the process of my work of doing the drawing out process and actually teaching people what's really going on inside so that we can have a much more compassionate perspective of ourselves and be able to learn to work with ourselves in a more compassionate way. As I found that a lot of times there's so much misinformation. There's so much and distorted teachings, I think, about what goes on inside, throughout history, is that oftentimes we've been taught to fight these parts of ourselves, see ourselves as somehow flawed or weak, or there's something bad about us. But as I've discovered in my work, through my work with actually working with these parts within myself and within my clients, people all over the world, that what we think is bad about us, or we think is a flaw inside of us, or a weakness, or some kind of reaction that we really wish we didn't have, that it exists for a reason, for one thing, and for another, every part of you is just doing the very best it can to protect you, and especially to protect you from pain. Why? Because you've been hurt before. So that's what this is all about, and I've been sharing. I actually want to add just a little apology here, because previously in my episodes, I have been following along a PowerPoint, because it's really important that I show you these illustrations so that you get a visual of what I'm talking about. I'm a very visual person, so it really helps me. And each time I show the slideshow, but then I found a way that I thought, well, if I hit pause share on the screen share, that it would then show my face. So a few times, if you've watched my previous episodes, you might have seen me say, oh, wait a minute, you haven't seen my face for a while. And then I click something, and then I thought it was actually going back to this, just me and this screen. But unfortunately, I looked back on those videos recently and I saw, oh gosh, it's just the PowerPoint all the way through pretty much. So I want to apologize for that. I don't know why it's not working, but whatever, it's doing what it's doing. So maybe a little bit clunky on this episode, because I am going to try to actually get the, face-to-face interaction here, so that you're not just looking at my slides all the time. So with that said, I'm going to share my screen, and here we go. All right, Inner Work for Greater Good. So I always talk about the ChangeLight system. This is what's going on inside all of us. I try to keep it really simple, because I think that we get overloaded with too much information in trying to understand, or get too over analytical about what's really happening inside of us. I find that if we keep it simple, it's a lot easier to grasp what's going on inside. And once you understand the dynamics and the parts of you and what each type is trying to do, then you can start to recognize, oh, I've got a defender popping up, or oh, I've got this popping up. But that ultimately, all of this stuff that's inside of you, its original intention was to help you live your truth. Your truth is that treasure that is inside of you. And as I see it, it is your one and only job on earth to live your truth. Because when you live your truth, you light up the world. You have the greatest possible impact you can have. And obviously, I've said many times before that my focus is especially on mission-driven leaders and change makers, those of us who are driven to make a positive difference in the world. Because those of us who really do have this as part of our truth, our mission to make a difference and really change our world for the better, then, the more at peace that we can feel and the more empowered we can feel, then the faster we can work together and make a difference and really heal the ills in our world. There are so many problems in our world, and it's so overwhelming. I know, but that's where you can do that inner work to heal those parts of you. And as those parts of you heal, you are healing humanity. As you are a human healing, you are healing humanity. And that is what this is about. And as you then show up more beautifully and vibrantly and radiantly in the world, then you can make a bigger difference, not just by what you do, but by who you are, by the light that you shine, by the energy that you radiate, by the way you impact people with how you respond to things and how you relate to them. And it's just makes life so much easier when we're fully fully living our truth. It's not always easy to live your truth, and I don't want to mistake you, make any giving you mistaken impressions around that, because sometimes it can be hard, but you know your truth. And when you know your truth and you're living your truth, then you know that that is the most at peace and empowered you can possibly be. That is what this is about. So of course, I've been talking about, if you've seen my previous episodes, I talk about your exPowers, which are those parts that feel like they get in the way of you really living that truth. But then also, as I've been covering in the last few episodes, how your exPowers relate to your emPowers, which their whole job is to empower you to live that truth that you are here to live. And then of course, we have your guiding star, which is the vision you carry of you, fully living your truth and having the impact that you desire to have. And then your truth is that treasure inside of you, that is that inner knowing of who you are and who you are here to be. So it is your inner compass. That's what this is about. We are accessing that inner compass inside of you that knows who you are, knows who you're here to be, and can guide you there. Just like your guiding star can be that vision that also guides you. Your truth is really the wonderfulness of the full wonderfulness of you. So with that being said, I always do this. Here's my little animation that I forgot. We're talking about your exPowers and your emPowers. We're on the third of the series. We talked about how certain exPowers relate to certain exPowers, and anyway, we're on the third one. So in this case, we've talked about your inner sovereign. We've actually talked about all of these. I've been through all of these things. So if you're curious about any of these inner emPowers inside of you, you can watch previous episodes about each one. But the point is, we have these three emPowers inside of us. Their job is to empower us to live our truth. They each have their own ways of doing this. Okay. They each have it's like they have their own sort of like, this is my lane, or this is my genius zone. It's like they've got their own unique gifts and skills and aptitudes and tendencies, etc., that they bring to you, that they bring to your life experience, your experience of life, and your ability to live your truth. So we covered your sovereign and how it relates to, well, let me just do this actually. We covered your sovereign, how it relates to your defenders. We covered your impresario and how it relates to controllers. And next, we are talking about the free spirit and how it relates to wounded. So here they are as they relate to each other. We're going to talk this time about the free spirit wounded connection there. Now, this is a very, let me put it this, I'm going to go back. Let me put it this way. So we've got an impresario, we've got a sovereign, we've got a free spirit. We've got controllers, we've got defenders, we've got woundeds. Here's the thing, is that controllers and defenders, for the most part, really only exist because we have woundeds, because we are wounded, because we carry wounds, okay? So it's not to say that when I do my work with people that, a defender, if a defender shows up and, when they draw out their inner struggle, a defender shows up, it's not as though there's always going to be a wounded that shows up with it, but, or a controller, it's not always going to be a wounded. But the whole point is that controllers and defenders are trying to protect us from being hurt or from feeling pain. So where is that hurt and pain? The wounded. And it's not to say that the other ones don't feel pain, but the point is our woundeds are really at the core of our pain. They are the biggest denizens of our inner darkness, if you will. They are those parts of us that ultimately we can heal the controllers and we can heal the defenders and we can feel so much better and so much more at peace. And I've did this, I've done this for years, but those woundeds, that's really what's really down there. And the more we can heal those woundeds, the more at peace we can feel. I just want to also say something really quick, that when it comes to woundeds, here, I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna stop share. Here we go. Now you can see my face. When it comes to inner woundeds, it's really interesting because I'll just tell a really quick story. Like recently, I've made some bigger changes in my life. I've in my work, I've created an online community that has an online program, a course that you can take. I also have new, client options. Anyway, and I did a whole rebrand of my business because this is what I really felt called to do for a while, and it really needed it. So I've been doing that. And then, and all along the way, I've been feeling fantastic. I've been feeling really wonderful and excited. It was triggered along the way, obviously, by some of the changes we were making and, some of the realizations I was having and how it was really forcing me to step into, some bigger spaces in my life. But interestingly, most of the time I was feeling really good. But then after I launched the community and the course and, all this new brand and everything, all of a sudden, even though I've cleared all this other stuff inside of me, those controllers, those defenders, and I've cleared some woundeds over time. Oh boy, let me tell you, you want to know what showed up for me? Woundeds. These little kids inside of me, mostly in this case, all little girls who were carrying wounds had caused me to feel deeply insecure, terrified that people wouldn't show up for me in my work or wouldn't be interested in what I'm offering. In fact, one of them, her message was, nobody cares about what I care about. And that was a huge, hugely painful belief for me. I'm very much about connection and connecting with people. And I think that because of certain experiences growing up, these parts of me formed that were wounded. And so the point is, it's just interesting to me how even after all the healing and clearing that I've done and feeling so great and so empowered, it really, when it came to really stepping into my truth even more, what actually showed up a lot was woundeds. So a lot of woundeds, as I said, they're at the core of what's really going on underneath all of that defender and controller energy. And sure enough, that was the case for me. So I'll keep sharing. So free spirit, how does the free spirit relate to wounded? So let's look again at what the free spirit is. Let's just do a recap. So the free spirit's all about being playful, joyful, funny, in the now, pleasure-seeking, imaginative, self-expressive, artistic, emotional, loving, generous, sweet, innocent, and carefree. And you'll see that I have them represented as children because a lot of times that's what your free spirit is. It's that joyful, young, innocent, exuberant, just no limitations, let's just have fun, let's just play, let's just have a great time, all about wanting to experience joy and pleasure. So that's a lot of times, a lot of children are like that. And I'm sure as a child, you had a lot of that. You were probably very joyful. And sadly, of course, there are times when, well, we'll talk about this, but basically how certain traumas and everything can really keep us from being fully joyful as children. But a lot of times when you see children, they're very free and they're very joyful, and they don't always pick up after themselves. They don't think a lot of times in terms of tidiness or cleanliness, because they don't care. They're just like, whatever, I'm using this thing, then I throw it on the ground and I do this, and they go from one thing to another. And so your free spirit is that part of you that really loves pleasure and loves to enjoy things and loves to light up and be free, loves to be creative, loves to be self-expressive, really just loves to have fun and be in the moment, in the now, doesn't care about schedules, doesn't care about, rules or anything. Let's just be free and have fun. So how is it that this free spirit energy, this wonderful part of you, and it turned into wounded? How does that part of you get wounded? Now, some of you might be watching this and being kind of like, well, that's an easy question to answer. But really, it's interesting to see how, we can have such a powerful part of us as the free spirit, and yet we end up with these parts that are so wounded. So again, let's recap. Wounded feel unloved, unwanted, rejected, ignored, alone, forgotten, abandoned. Like some of them do feel that way. Others might feel just mostly scared, anxious, or confused. Others feel very sad, hopeless, trapped, helpless. Others feel criticized, shamed, misunderstood. And then others can feel angry and believe that it's not fair. Before I talked about that, I had a bunch of woundeds come up, but a lot of them felt like, in this case, it was like the unloved, unwanted, rejected, ignored, alone, forgotten, abandoned, like feeling very, and I'm sure this came from my childhood, and I can think of some specific scenarios or situations why that would have happened for me, why it could have happened for you too, of just feeling like nobody cared about what I cared about, that nobody really wanted to sit and play with me. And that may seem like such a simple thing. You know, as an adult, you kind of go, oh, whatever, you know, I got over it. But really, when you're a child, everything feels bigger. Children tend to internalize and personalize a whole lot more. So children tend to think that if something happens or someone's behaving a certain way, it's my fault they're behaving that way. If mommy comes home and she's in a bad mood, well, it must be because I was a bad kid. So then that part of you starts to think, well, the part of you may feel like, oh, I'm sad and I feel bad and I feel ashamed and I'm sorry that I hurt mommy. Other parts of you may feel like, well, then I just need to be really, really good for her so that she won't get mad at me or stay mad at me. But the fact that mommy was mad may have had nothing to do with you at all. Even if mommy came home and was raging at you and acting as though her anger was your fault, may not have at all been your fault. But the truth is that woundeds are basically those parts of us, oftentimes forming in childhood, but sometimes in adulthood as well. But they're the parts of us that carry those wounds. So, you know, in my case, it wasn't simple for me. It was hugely traumatic for me to feel so like that nobody wanted to be a part of what I wanted to do and really just sit and have fun with me. And so that felt very wounding for me because it was so important to me. Same thing with like if mommy comes home and she's angry and you just want to have a good connection with mommy and you want to feel safe with mommy. I mean, who doesn't want to feel safe with their mother or their father or everyone, right? But that part of you may not have felt safe, or it may have felt criticized and shamed and misunderstood or confused. You know, I've worked with a lot of woundeds where they'll say they're just so lost and confused, and they'll say, I don't understand why he's so mean to me. And that he could be anybody, that he could be the father, that he could be a teacher, that he could be a brother or a cousin or something. But, you know, a guy that they saw on the street when they were a kid who did something. And it's like, well, I don't understand. There's this confusion. And that's like, because that free spirit inside that's been impacted. Remember, I said it's very innocent. So it's like, I don't understand why they're so mean to me. So the point is that woundeds end up forming because we have these parts of us that are carrying this pain from our various life experiences. And even though as an adult, those life experiences may seem like they're not that big and they're not that consequential, and you look at it from your adult perspective and you kind of, no big deal, you would be so surprised by how even the littlest thing could have been deeply wounding to you as a child. And so that's a big part of it, is that innocent, playful, joyful part that just wants to have fun suddenly runs into situations where they're actually feeling rejected, where they're feeling shamed. A lot of times we can feel, let me just put it this way. A lot of times people are scared to feel true, unadulterated joy. And there are a number of reasons why that is, but I've found that the main reason why oftentimes people are scared of feeling joy is because as a child, they were experiencing, there may have been a moment where they were experiencing such excitement and this is wonderful and everything is great. And then boom, something comes along or someone comes along and squashes that joy. Or there's some disappointment. You know, it may be like you say, Daddy, look, I drew this picture for you. And you're so excited to show Daddy that picture. And Daddy looks at it and goes, eh. Or Daddy doesn't look at it at all. Or Daddy says, that's ugly. That doesn't look like me. That hurts. That really hurts. And so what can often happen, this is a very simple example, but what can happen is then the feeling of joy gets associated with pain, gets associated with disappointment, gets associated with fear, gets associated with rejection. And so that's often what happens and why it can feel so, why it can be even hard to then feel that joyfulness of that free spirit again, because so often our inner free spirit has had, we've had those experiences and parts of our inner free spirit have been wounded or hurt in some way or another. So that's, just so you know, that's one of the sort of, just a few examples of how that free spirit can end up transforming into wounded and getting impacted, getting distorted by pain and by fear, and therefore take on these feelings and take on these behaviors. So what is it that woundeds are trying to do, right? Let me just go back on this because, if you watch the previous episode about woundeds, I talked about this. But here's the thing is that woundeds, let me just say what they're saying, and then I'll extrapolate on it. So they're trying to get your attention so that you'll notice how terrible they feel and will do something about it, okay? So they want you, when you feel that crying little kid inside, or you feel that part of you that's so anxious or scared or what have you, that ultimately that's what that can be one thing that part of you really wants or needs, is it needs your attention so that you'll pay attention to it. So it wants your attention so that you will notice how it's feeling, and you will console it, you will take care of it, you will, pay attention to it and give it the love that it needs and that it needed back then when it was originally hurt. Another thing, though, a wounded can be trying to do is actually not trying to do anything other than protect itself, meaning it's not trying to get attention. It's literally just curled up in a corner somewhere. It is hidden. It is, trying to, it's deep somewhere in the dark. And here's where I'm going to pause the share. Stop the share. So those kinds of woundeds, oftentimes when I work with a wounded like that, when someone draws out a wounded like that, they literally draw that wounded like in a dark hole or in a dark corner, a windowless room, no doors, no windows, where it feels trapped and it feels stuck there. And a lot of times that's because that at some point in your life, you did not feel protected. You felt like there was no one there to protect you. You felt abandoned, you felt neglected. And so some part of your free spirit, that joyful, wonderful, just loves to be free and have fun, felt that and took on that pain and fear, and therefore ended up in that dark place. It's why I often talk about how it's like these parts of us have gone from light to dark. They've fallen into darkness because they've been distorted by pain and by fear. And that's often how when people draw them out of their subconscious, that's actually how they look. So the point is, ultimately, that's what woundeds are trying to do. Let's go back to the first one. So woundeds are trying to get your attention so that you'll take care of them. That's because at some point or another, you were not noticed, you were not taken care of, you were dismissed. Some part of you felt like was in so much pain and yet didn't feel like there was any resolution, or didn't feel like there was any explanation, or didn't feel like there was any reason, or didn't feel like they were heard or valued or validated, or their feelings were validated. And so a lot of times that kind of wounded really needs validation. It needs to be, taken care of and seen and heard and understood. And then in terms of the second one, let me just explain really quickly. We've got controllers and defenders. As I said, their whole intention is to try to protect you from pain or another part of you from pain. And so that's oftentimes what will happen too, is when you've got that part that feels so defenseless and so wounded and so hurt, is that you might often have a defender who's standing in front of it, because that wounded doesn't know how to protect itself. And so it might be sitting there going, I can't protect myself, so I'm just going to pull away from the world, basically. I'm not going to pull deep inside of the person I'm in. I'm going to pull deep inside of her and hide in this dark place until it's safe for me to come out. And in the meantime, maybe that defender is the thing that says, and shows up to try to protect you, to try to protect that wounded. So that's just so you have a little bit of idea. And I think in the next episode, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about, some of those dynamics, and talk about basically the how important it is to recognize these parts of you and what they're trying to do and how they relate to each other. So let's share the screen again. All right. So these are the basic things that woundeds are trying to do. So let me just go back real quick. So that's essentially when we talk about, again, I'm going to go back, when we talk about the free spirit and the woundeds, really the more we can heal those woundeds inside of us, mind you, we have to, in terms of my work, like I might have to actually work with a defender before I can really work with that wounded. It's, and work with a controller before I'm allowed to really work with that wounded, or I might have to work with a controller in order to heal the wounded, because it could be that a part of that controller has taken on behaviors from someone in your life, and in order for the wounded to heal, we got to heal the controller that's in attacking the wounded. So that's oftentimes how that works. Just a little bit of just nerding out on you guys, on you ladies a little bit, just sharing some sort of behind the scenes stuff in terms of how this works, but also in terms of how the dynamics are inside and what needs to be healed. But my point is that woundeds really are at the core of our woundedness. They're at the core of our pain. And it's often because they are the childlike parts of us, the joyful, free, generous, sweet, innocent, etc. parts of us that have been hurt, that have experienced pain or disappointment or danger, or have felt unsafe in some way or another. And that is why they have become wounded. Okay, so if you've experienced, and I know we all have, any of these kinds of experiences that have made us feel in any way, shape, or form unsafe, I guarantee you've got woundeds inside of you who are carrying that pain, who are carrying that struggle, who are carrying that anxiety, that fear, that abandonment, that neglect, etc., etc. So that's also by way of saying that I always like to share about the ChangeLight system and about the drawing out process, because when it comes to having wounded, when it comes to having any of these exPowers inside of us, we're not doomed to live with these, okay? I can't, one of my big agendas here is that, there's so part of, and I mentioned before about misinformation, is that there's such this like impression that like, oh, if we have this wound, well, we just have to learn to deal with it. We just have to learn to live with it. We just, or just breathe through it, and that's about all you can do. Or, and I'm like, no, that is just not true. That we can be healed of these wounds. There are a number of different modalities that can heal these various wounds. I, of course, am sharing mine, which is the drawing out process. It's part of it forms the crux of my ChangeLight system. What it does is it permanently transforms those exPowers, we're talking about woundeds here, can transform a wounded permanently back into its free spirit essence. So that rather than being in that dark, scared and alone in that dark hole, it's free, it's happy, it's at peace, it's reconnected with you, it's filled with love. And I just also want to add here too, that when it comes to the wounded and free spirit dynamic, or just this whole, the fact that we have free spirits and they've become woundeds, but woundeds can transform back into free spirits, is that a lot of times people think, and I've had clients come to me, especially if they've endured a lot of trauma in their childhood, especially if they were abandoned, especially if their parents or their caregivers did not show up for them and were not appropriate caregivers. Or if they felt, especially, this is a big one, like if their parents, let's say, were alcoholics, and they felt as a child that they needed to take care of the parent, or if the parent had some other kind of issue, and the child, if you as a child felt like you needed to take care of the parent, then a lot of times that is, most of the time in my experience, that is what causes those neglected, abandoned, those wounded that crawl away into the darkness and almost seem to disappear. I mean, I've actually worked with wounded that thought they were invisible because they're like, nobody sees me. I didn't even know I existed. That is the depth of trauma to those child parts of you, to the free spirit parts of you that turn into wounded. But here's the thing. So you might, as an adult, be like, you know what, I'm just talking about this free spirit stuff, and it just, that's nice and everything, but I think my inner child is dead. And I'm saying this because I've had clients say this to me. They say, I don't have an inner child. They say, my inner child died a long time ago. And I say, okay, well, let's just see. Always, we always find that child or one of those children inside of you. We have multiple, but we find that free spirit energy inside of them, and we free it and we heal it, so that rather than that person feeling like they don't have an inner child, feeling so devoid of joy and freedom and peace, instead it transforms. We bring it out of the darkness, bring it into the light, transform it back into its true, joyful, loving, warm, expressive, creative essence. And so this is what the drawing out process does. This is what I do with my clients. This is what I teach in my course and community, in the ChangeLight course and community. I'll give you the link next. But I just really want to emphasize this. This is what is possible for you and for everyone, that we can heal these parts of us that have been so wounded and so distorted by the pain of our world and by the painful life experiences that we've had, by the fears we've endured. We can heal those parts of us. There are ways of bringing them out of the subconscious and healing them. And the drawing out process is how I do that. And it's all part of the ChangeLight system. As I said, you can learn that in the here we go. I was going to the next slide, but I'm not. Anyway, this is again the ChangeLight system, but you've already seen this and I'm out of time. So I just want to point out the ChangeLight system, community.changelight.world, or just go to changelight.world and you'll see all the info about it. But the whole point is, my intention is to teach you. I'm obviously teaching you about the discoveries I've made, but in this system, I teach you the techniques, I teach you the tools so that you can transform these inner struggles that you have back into inner strength, so that you can feel more free and whole and at peace. Because as I said, when it comes to woundeds, and frankly, when it comes to some controllers and defenders, it's all about, a big part of their healing is just bringing them out of the darkness and validating them and helping them feel seen. That's a big part of the healing process. So that's a lot of how it begins with the drawing out process, and what you can learn in my wonderful, safe and supportive community, where you can do your inner work for greater good. So I hope this has been helpful for you. I always enjoy sharing with you. And, ultimately my intention is always to really help you gain greater clarity and wisdom about who you are. And so that when these parts of you show up, whether they be exPowers or emPowers, you know what they are. You learn to recognize them and you learn to work with them. If it's an emPower, you learn to honor it. I teach that in the course in the community. But then also if it's an exPower, you learn, oh, this is what it's trying to do. And this is, what it needs, which is what I've been teaching you. So in any case, I hope this is helpful. I'll be very honest with you. I think I haven't fully decided what I'm going to do in the next episode. If I'm going to actually recap the exPowers and the emPowers and just really talk about how they work together, and then how to work with them. But I may actually go straight into the guiding star. I don't know, because next up I've got guiding star, and after that I've got truth. My whole intention is to share these aspects of the ChangeLight system with you. So I haven't decided. So that's all by way of saying, I don't know what the next episode's going to be about, and we'll just find out when it happens. All righty. Thank you so much. As always, it's a pleasure sharing with you. My name is Emily Eldridge with ChangeLight, Inner Work for Greater Good. I'll see you next week.